I have put over 215 hours into The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and over the course of those 215 hours, I had a lot of thoughts about the game's overall quality. So many that I decided to write a review of the game, just as I do with all Zelda games I play. But as I sat down to write about my experience with the game, I found it difficult to talk about this title in a way that didn't make me sound like I hated it. Which, I mean, I don't completely hate this game, but it is true that if you sat me down and forced me to talk about Tears of the Kingdom for 3 hours, like Mr. Stray did on his podcast, you would be hard-pressed to find me saying anything particularly positive about the experience. So, to remedy that issue, and in the pursuit of offering an olive branch to the millions of people who love this game, I thought I would make an entire video detailing the one thing about Tears of the Kingdom which I unabashedly, undoubtedly loved: Princess Zelda. Let me be completely honest with you. I did not care for this character at all during Breath of the Wild's runtime, and that's because the story in Breath of the Wild is, kind of a non-factor for one, but what story is present in that game is, to be quite honest, very poorly written. The characters, well, the ones from 100 years ago anyway, were particularly flawed. None of them acted like real people, and Zelda was probably the worst offender in that regard. The game tries so very hard to get you to feel bad for this girl, but she is such a blank, boring piece of cardboard that it becomes impossible to feel any real emotions in relation to her struggles. Especially when these struggles are long in the past and we already know she perseveres through them in the end, because, again, her story is told exclusively through flashbacks. She's constantly frustrated that she can't use magic, and she likes studying ancient ruins. Those are her two personality traits. And the vast majority of the time, these traits are told through the most stilted, lifeless cutscenes I've ever seen in a Zelda game. And I've played them all. God help you if you played this game in English. I played it in Japanese, but even with the wonderful Yu Shimamura voicing her, nothing could be done to salvage this lifeless husk of a character. For real, the last thing I would have expected coming out of Tears of the Kingdom would be for me to hate nearly everything about the game's story and characters except for Princess Zelda. And yet that's exactly what happened. So what changed? Well, not the quality of the writing within the cutscenes, that's for sure. Just like in Breath of the Wild, we get a whole host of flashbacks which we have to discover in order to piece the game's story together. This is awful, and these cutscenes are horribly written, but that's besides the point. Because unlike in Breath of the Wild, these cutscenes are not the sole source of Zelda's personality in this game. They're not even the primary source of her personality. Far from it, in fact. Instead, Tears of the Kingdom takes a page out of the Elder Scrolls Guide of Storytelling, and lets the player discover her character for themselves through something called environmental storytelling. Perhaps you think the Elder Scrolls comparison was random by my part, but I assure you, it is not. In every single interview I have ever read regarding the development of this game and its predecessor, whenever a developer is asked the question, what games inspired Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, is always on the top of that list. Breath of the Wild certainly took several notes from Skyrim in terms of world design, aesthetics, and game structure, but it failed to match the quest quality, gameplay variety, and caliber of writing that Skyrim possesses. Tears of the Kingdom remedied several of these issues, and most impressively of all, managed to emulate Bethesda's incredibly detailed environments and create a type of storytelling that is incredibly difficult to pull off in a video game: environmental storytelling. And this is where Zelda's character writing really benefited, because there's one area of the game in particular where Tears of the Kingdom told an entire story through no other narrative device than the game world's environment, where rather than telling the player about the kind of person Zelda is, he is allowed instead to discover her personality through exploration within the game world. Link's house in Hateno Village. Now, here's the thing. According to this game, Link doesn't have a house in Hateno Village. You can't buy one, and you don't already have one at the start of the game. Or do you? Let's take a step back to Breath of the Wild for a second here. In Breath of the Wild, there was this guy named Bolson who ran a construction company. If you performed several services for him, he would eventually sell you an abandoned house in Hateno Village for 3,000 rupees. A good deal, considering the size of the estate and the decent shape of the structure. You could further enhance your living space until, finally, your dream home was built. Cool. So flash forward to Tears of the Kingdom, 6 years after the events of Breath of the Wild. Link's house is still here in Hateno, and it's fully intact and the same as before. Except nobody in the village calls it Link's house. They call it Princess Zelda's house. So what gives? Did Link never canonically buy this house in Breath of the Wild? Perhaps that's not an unprecedented theory. After all, several characters from Breath of the Wild don't seem to remember Link at all when they damn well should. Most frustratingly of all for me was Hetsu, because when you collect 900 pieces of golden shit for a magic forest fairy, the least he can do is remember your goddamn name. Well, here's the thing. The house looks exactly the same as it did in Breath of the Wild, apart from the weapon racks having been taken down and replaced with pictures. Pictures which may seem random at first glance. A golden horse, a couple guys cooking around a campfire, a herd of weird-looking animals, a woman standing in a meadow of flowers, etc. But here's the thing. If you actually take the time to explore the game world and complete quests which relate to Princess Zelda, you'll learn that each and every one of these photos has a significance. The golden horse was found wounded by Princess Zelda and Link when they were traveling, and the princess brought it back to a nearby stable and paid to have it taken care of. You can even acquire the horse for yourself by completing a quest, and learn the story from the local stable hand. The guys cooking by the campfire spent a night camping with Link and Zelda, and she taught them a recipe for beef stew, a gift they still cherish deeply when you later encounter the men on the road. The weird-looking animals are actually an endangered species discovered by Zelda, and she established a nature reserve with a park ranger and all to keep the animals protected. Again, you can visit this reserve for yourself, and there's even a whole host of rumors surrounding the event, some people saying that Princess Zelda herself rode one of the beasts. Finally, the woman standing in the middle of a meadow was personally tasked by Zelda to care for a garden of rare flowers near the castle, and the princess often took time to help with the maintenance of the garden, a fact that the subject of the photo likes to brag about quite often, as you'll no doubt learn when you speak to her yourself. All of these photos capture the events of Link and Zelda's adventures throughout Hyrule over the last 6 or so years. But there is one picture that predates Zelda's time in Hateno Village. This one. It is a picture of Link, Zelda, and the 4 champions taken 106 years ago, and it was placed in this room by none other than Link himself, at the end of the Champions Ballad DLC back in Breath of the Wild, proving that this house is, indeed, Link's. He bought it and renovated it, else he could not have hung up this photo. Keep in mind, this photograph was a one-of-a-kind given to Link by Cass, who doesn't appear anywhere in Tears of the Kingdom, meaning it had to have come from him at this exact moment, rather than Zelda just putting up her own copy. Also, you had to have actually finished the DLC and transferred your data over to Tears of the Kingdom in order for the picture to appear at all, further proving that this is Link's photo and Link's house. See, it doesn't appear in my game whatsoever, because the save transfer doesn't always work, and my Switch acted like I never even beat Breath of the Wild. Seriously, what the hell is this, Nintendo? I want my goddamn photo! So point being, this is still Link's house, not Zelda's. But Octo, I hear the more innocent viewer asking at this point, if this is Link's house, then why does everyone in the village call it Zelda's house? And why is there only one bed? Link must have just given her the house. Well, you see, that's... How do I put this, little Jimmy? You see, Zelda and Link are, well, oh, for Christ's sake, they're lovers! Zelda and Link are sharing that goddamn twin bed. Though in all fairness, given how tiny Link is, it's probably more like a king-size bed for the two of them. If you needed any more proof, by the way, the game developers made sure to give it through the game's Ludo narrative. That's just a fancy way of saying that the gameplay itself is telling the story here. You see, Link isn't allowed to sleep in other people's beds in Tears of the Kingdom, meaning that you can only sleep at inns which he pays at, or in the barracks under Lookout Landing, or in his own home. In other words, he needs explicit permission to sleep in any bed which he does not solely own. And yet, we're allowed to sleep in Zelda's bed, meaning Link must have standing permission to sleep in Zelda's house, and in Zelda's bed. This is the part where some jackass will still type, but they're just roommates who sleep together in the comments. And while I would like to believe these people are joking, statistics tell us that that is probably not the case. So why does Zelda call it her house? Well, for the same reason your mom calls it her house, even if it was your dad who paid for it. Or vice versa, maybe your mom paid for it and your dad is the one calling it his house. As for the villagers, well, let me put it this way. If you were in a relationship with Amelia Clark, and she moved in with you, do you think people would look at your home and go, oh, that's Dave's house, he's an accountant? Or do you think they would say, oh my god, that's where Khaleesi lives? Point being, the reason we only hear it being referred to as Princess Zelda's house is because she's the goddamn queen of Hyrule. Why would anyone think she doesn't own it? A better question is, what is a princess doing living in a house in the middle of nowhere? Well, 2 reasons. 1, her boyfriend lives here. obviously. But reason number 2, she decided to establish a school for the children of the village, commissioning its construction and hiring teachers. Again, we learn this through environmental storytelling. We can learn how she feels about the children by going into her private study and seeing that on the wall, she has several pictures that the children drew for her hanging up above her desk. And if we visit the school itself, you see several more pictures that the kids drew of Zelda and Link, who likely visited the school together quite often. But here's the cutest bit of all. Zelda had a private study built for her just outside of the house. As she puts it, it's very useful when I'm working alone and need to concentrate. Again, if you needed further evidence that these two are indeed living in the same house together as a couple, then here it is. Link's the distraction here. But what's really cute is that it's in this diary, the one that's outside of the house and away from Link, where she writes about the main man himself. She's giddy about a present that she's prepared for him, and proud of herself for finding a place in Hyrule Castle where she thinks even Link won't find it. Which is extremely funny because the way she hid the present, with a torch puzzle, is one of the most common puzzle archetypes in the older Zelda games. But she's proud of herself for hiding it in the way that she did, and giddy about the surprised look she'll see on Link's face when she gives it to him. This is super cute, I'm not gonna lie. It was at this point where I really began to like Zelda. No longer was her character just a bland plot device like she was in Breath of the Wild. Now she begins to look like a real person, and it's the little moments like these that really hit that nail on the head for me. The way she turned Link's house into a home, replacing weapon racks with photographs of their adventures together. The contrast in tone between her work journal, detailing all the troubles she's had with restoring Hyrule, with her personal journal, where she gushes about her boyfriend and writes about the presents she plans on showering him in. The little mementos and drawings she keeps from all the children whose lives she's improved during her time in Hotono. All of these things are told through the environment. No cutscenes, no dialogue, none of that is necessary. Just the player's own sense of exploration and narrative interest in Princess Zelda's story. What a brilliant piece of game design. It's so rare for me to find a game which genuinely impresses me with its attention to detail in regards to little narrative devices like this. But whoever designed this house and wrote the narrative told within deserves a goddamn medal. If the whole game's writing quality was as good as this one area's, then this game could have been a masterpiece. Instead, we got this.
Sacred Stone? Demon King? Psycho Mantis.
This strong writing in regards to Zelda and Link's relationship really culminates at the end of the game in particular. After you kill Ganon, your final task of the game is not another boss fight, or a dungeon, or some other great challenge, it's simply to save Zelda. I love this bit so much, because the game, again, led up to this moment by building and establishing the strength of this character and her relationship with our protagonist. Let me put it this way, if you told me to save Zelda at the end of Breath of the Wild, I would have begrudgingly complied. Maybe I would have even let her die just to see what happens, if I were in a particularly mischievous mood. But at the end of Tears of the Kingdom, I'm like, after you catch her, there's some story mumbo-jumbo. I really don't care about this shit. And then Zelda turns to Link and, with tears in her eyes, says, "Tadaima, Link." Now, I don't want to get all weeby on you. I hate anime as much as the next guy, so believe me, I don't want to pull out the old. But I feel like it's important in this context. Tadaima is a shortened Japanese phrase meaning I'm home. It's one of the most common Japanese phrases. That's because people say it all the time. Every day, in fact. Because whenever you leave the house for a good period of time and then return, it's customary to, announce your presence. But here's the thing. It's only really common amongst people who live together, be they roommates, family, lovers, because that's who you'd return home to. But Zelda isn't saying "Tadaima" upon returning to her house or to Hyrule Castle. Rather, she says the phrase specifically to Link, because he's her family. He's the one she's returned home to. And that says all you need to know about the strength of their relationship. A relationship which the player needs to uncover for himself through exploration within the game world. This is probably one of my favorite Link-Zelda relationships. The only thing that really holds it back is Link and his rather bland character in the Breath of the Wild games. But that's a whole nother topic entirely. And a negative one at that, so we'll ignore it for now. As far as Zelda herself goes, I would say that she's my number 2, only behind her incarnation in Ocarina of Time, the best game ever. And there's no shame in being the silver medal when you're competing against Ocarina of Time. Whoever wrote the side quests and designed the environmental storytelling in this game, bravo. Please give this person the lead writing role on the next game. because the rest of this game's story was complete garbage.